Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another podcast from the Coming Ashore program. My name is Daryl Bates from the Marine Society, and it's my pleasure to host this edition to introduce one of our newest mentors, Richard Wasson. But before we move on to that and hear about Richard's background, let me talk to you a little bit about the program itself. In case you're new to it, you may be listening to us from any part of the world. You may be at sea. You may already be ashore. But this is a new program that the Marine Society are running, and it is to support any seafarer who's considering making that transition to a shoreside role in the maritime sector. And what we want to do is really provide as wide a range of support through resources, mentoring, help with CVs, help with interviewing, uh, book lists even, and then hopefully some work placements ashore. So really to give you that support that you need and give you some structure to your plans to coming ashore. And we know that through research that has been conducted on the sector, that it's an area that seafarers are seriously lacking in, and many of you struggle to make the right choices coming ashore. And we are here as a Marine Society to help to fill that void. And so without much further ado, I want to move straight on to talking to one of our specialist mentors on the program, and it's Richard Wasson. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Daryl. How are you? Many thanks for welcoming me on. Yeah, after that introduction, it's great to be here. It's great to be part of such a good cause.
Thank you. And I can tell from that accent you're calling from across the water from England. Tell us where you are, and then just tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
your background and what attracted you to a seagoing life in the first instance, Richard.
yeah, sure. So I'm sitting currently just outside Belfast in Northern Ireland, where I'm from. I'm actually from the northwest of Northern Ireland. And I grew up always been around the water and sailing, and just was in love with the sea. It's one of my first ever childhood memories has been out on a sailing yacht with my dad. And I got very heavily involved in racing and dinghies and then yacht racing and that sort of thing. And I never really thought of it as a career, to be honest. And I like a lot of people, as time went on in my teens, my academic ability kind of decreased as partying and enjoying myself increased, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to university and didn't really click with it that much. And I still had a yearning always to be around the water. And so I came home after a year at university, and my dad sat me down and said, "Okay, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I'm going to be a professional sailor." And there was a few kind of odd looks from my mother and father, and that sort of fueled my fire to do that. And headed out to Australia, did some yachting qualifications, and the rest is kind of history, as it were.
And so fair to say it wasn't in the family history. I mean, a lot of people that go to sea tend to have some seafaring connection in the family, but not so in your case. Is that right?
In a professional no, in a professional capacity, no. Very much recreationally, boating was very much in my family's background, both my grandfather and my dad. But in a professional capacity, no, very very little seafaring in the
Mm.
family.
Mm. And interestingly, you didn't necessarily go down the standard merchant navy deck officer route. Is that right? You focus more on the yacht sector. Can you talk us through that?
I did, yeah. To be perfectly honest with you, I went away initially for a bit of fun and to have perhaps a gap year or two. That gap year turned into, well, it's kind of still going in a way, but it turned into 15 plus years, really. Of bumming about on boats initially, and doing a few deliveries and things, and becoming an R-way instructor. And then it was only then, really, through that I got on to the much, much bigger yachts. And I finished up my career as chief officer on a 90-meter exploration
Oh, right. So,
tug, which was built as a tug in 1969 and then converted to a yacht in the 90s, and very much a world cruising, commercially classed vessel, which we explored all over the world. It was a very, very interesting project to be a part of. Yes, I was on there for a good few, as second officer initially, and then as chief officer.
So already a different perception to the yacht, to the super yacht industry. You're talking about something that was, as you say, focused on exploration and a very different working environment to being based out of Antibes and enjoying that sort of life. Then, by the sound of it.
Yes, yes. Although we did a little bit of that, but not much, thankfully. So our owners that I worked with primarily on the big boats like that, thankfully, were very adventurous and loved to travel, loved to see very, very remote places, which is fantastic. But obviously, that adds the challenges for us as crew in terms of the logistics, in terms of safety, in terms of what ifs. We did a lot of diving in the South Pacific in very, very remote areas. So yeah, we would have carried some very specialist medical equipment. We would have carried, all sorts of very technical equipment at times for doing that, and technical personnel as well if required. So yeah, it was very, very interesting. Before that, I worked on a sister vessel. And I actually, believe it or not, my job was purely to run the toys on board. So one of those toys was a 42-foot Nelson tender with twin Caterpillar engines in it. So it was a yacht, effectively. So I was the skipper and the engineer of that, and we cruised to high latitudes in her. We went up to the Arctic, all over Greenland, Norway, the Baltic Sea, and yeah, just had an amazing time exploring the world in it. But again, very technical cruising, very technical vessels.
So I'm getting the impression of a really interesting, varied life at sea. You've talked about some, working with some incredible kit, going to some distant places, very, very different to perhaps a lot of our listeners who are on the deep sea routes. Month in, month out, following a standard routine. So given that background that you were in, what was it that sort of attracted you or started you to think about coming ashore and actually leaving that industry and settling shoreside? What sort of started you on that journey, and then talk us through that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, there's a couple of things there. One of which was age, I would say, and just thinking, do I want to be doing this forever and ever? And the answer was actually no. I got a lot of the adventure. I was up to I was probably 32, 33, I guess, whenever I started thinking about it. And I had a lot of the travel bug and the adventure out of my system. And then, honestly, some little health niggles that were occurring just as a result of the intensity of the lifestyle and the amount of travel and, the fatigue involved in it. And a lot of people see these yachts, and think, you're sitting drinking gin and tonics on the aft deck with the owners all the time. But unfortunately, if you talk to anybody who's worked in a yacht, that is couldn't be further from the truth. So yeah, it's a very busy lifestyle, very busy lifestyle. So that was a lot of it, really. Was a couple of health niggles and I suppose fatigue that was building up over time, really. And then just thinking at this stage in life, better sooner rather than later, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our listeners will associate with those sort of reasons that you've mentioned, and the sort of things, age, health, and possibly family issues, and so very common reasons why seafarers would want to make that change. So you're at this stage, you've got these issues going on, and you're starting, what do I do? So did you just jump ashore? Was it serendipity? What was the next step? Did someone help you? What was the next stage for you?
Well, yeah, that's where I made some pretty horrendous mistakes.
That's what we want to hear.
Yeah. So I kind of thought, because to be honest, I hadn't really had a job on shore since I was at school. I worked in bars and stuff when I was at school, but I never really had a, inverted commas, proper job on shore. So I came ashore. I didn't really do an awful lot of planning, to be honest with you. And I did seek a couple of help, here and there, but from people who didn't really attach to what I did. They didn't really get what I did. They didn't really get my qualifications, my background, my transferable skills, which I think is a massive thing.
Right.
And it didn't. The first couple of years, it didn't really go that well. I did set up a business and things, which was okay. I've always been into the mentoring and training side of things. That's always been my passion, even at sea.
Yes.
Helping the crew and things. So I set up sort of a small training company to help people with their careers, and that had big potential. I'll be honest though, I didn't financially plan all that well, and therefore because of that, I get sucked into what I would call the yo-yo syndrome of going back to sea again. You know, I'd get an email from a vessel that I used to work on, and I'd think, yeah, it'd be great to earn a bit more money. And I ended up sort of going back and forth and not
And
really
just
anchoring myself on shore that well, you know.
and just on that, because I think again a lot of people will recognize that you describe a yo-yo effect. Is that legitimate? I mean, do you think someone can manage that sort of dual life, or do you think actually that's well, perhaps certainly in your case that wasn't sustainable? But do you think there is a place for maintaining, you know, seagoing short contracts and so on, and some kind of shore life? What would be your view on that?
Yeah, I think there is, if that's what you're. Yeah,
Mm,
I mean, for me, it's all down to
mm.
why are you coming ashore in the first place.
Right.
There, of course,
Motivation.
there are people that that do that, and it's quite an uncertain life in a way because you never really know when the next contract is coming. And
Mm,
I know for certain at the
exactly.
minute
Yeah.
there are people who do that. You know, there's quite a lot of people who do relief, you know, large yacht work
Mm,
in terms of captains, especially. You know, they do
mm,
transatlantics and that sort of thing.
mm,
But for example, the last 6 months, those people, their work is
yeah.
completely dried up because they haven't been employed. They're generally self-employed, so you're running your own business, sort of doing that. I have done that a little bit. It's extremely hard to plan your life doing that because invariably you will be stepping into a role, perhaps for someone who's had maybe a death in the family. They have to jump ship and go home really quick, and the company's looking for a captain like tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or you know, you get an email saying a captain's fallen sick. Would you come and fill
Mm,
the seat? Or a chief officer, whatever it may be. So it can be quite difficult to plan. But if that, you know, it can be done if that's what somebody, if they
yeah.
don't mind living that way. The flexibility means you can take a lot more leave. Obviously, you can say, right, I'm going to block with my diary and take the next 6 months off and not open up my diary for contracts until after that. It really depends. If you've got your finances sorted on shore, you know, if you've another kind of passive income, I'm sure, whether it's property rentals, whatever, possibly that could work. But yeah, it's each to the individual, really.
No,
It wouldn't be for me, no, that sort of life, really.
no.
I
Well,
would
thank
rather be
you.
at sea
Yeah, a very sensible
on
advice.
I'd rather be at sea on a proper rolling contract that I would be able to plan.
Trying to juggle too many balls. Yes. No, I
Mm,
totally recognize the practicalities or impracticalities that
mm.
could pose. So, coming back to yourself, as you say, you'd started this yo-yo effect, and then you obviously did make a proper transition. Was there something that a catalyst, a particular thing that finally made you make that step ashore and sort of turn your back, as it were,
Yeah.
on the seagoing? What was that?
Well, I suppose one of the things that I realized that I hadn't really done properly is a bit of kind of self exploration, for want of a better expression, to figure out, what I want for the future. And it was only then that when I did that, I realized, me going back on board just wasn't fitting really with my long-term plan. And I was sort of procrastinating, developing a proper career or business. And once I'd done that, I realized that whenever I went back, the last boat that I was on was just back in, well, it's a while ago now, a couple of years ago, I did a little bit of work, 2018. And I remember, because I was more self-aware, when I stepped foot on the deck of that boat, I was like, I felt like a bit of a sellout. I'd sold out on my own plan, if that makes sense.
Does.
And my feet hit the deck, and I was like, I'm here for the wrong reasons. I'm only here to top up my bank account, which of course can be a very valid reason
Mm,
for if you've got a plan
mm,
after that.
mm.
But it wasn't fitting with my personal goal of having a career and a business, on shore. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
it took that really for me. It took that kind of self work to figure out, what is my longer term plan. And I think that's where a lot of people miss out.
mm, yeah, and without, as I say, the support there, someone to get alongside and to give you that helping hand. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly you found that route only after sort of making some mistakes along the way. So,
Yes.
you know, and actually, I think that's one of the benefits you bring to the program, Richard, is those earlier mistakes that you've learned from, and I know that you've developed
Yeah.
for yourself and
Hopefully.
the people you already work with a particular approach to this whole concept of planning your transition ashore, and along the lines of a passage plan analogy. Now, I know there's some material you've already posted yourself on the internet, which our listeners can find if they search for you on YouTube and so on. But just for the benefits of this podcast, could you just briefly summarize the sort of, I think it's the four elements of that sort of passage plan analogy as applied to people transitioning ashore?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, definitely. I've become pretty passionate about this subject. Throughout hearing, not just my own journey, but also hearing and seeing colleagues have similar kind of struggles. And so as a result of that, and as a result of my kind of, as I mentioned, my background and my main interest always has been the instructing and mentoring and training side of things. So I went off and did a career coaching kind of qualification myself. And as a result of that, I designed a sort of system for people transitioning ashore. And as you say, very much like a passage plan, I see the career a bit like an ocean crossing, in that, we're setting out, we can very much plan what we're going to do, but we don't always know when we'll have to alter course. We're not absolutely sure, what's going to happen on that passage, i.e. the career. But however, that doesn't mean we don't plan. It means that, we gotta plan and then make the alterations as necessary. So what I've come up with really is a way for people to figure out what they're very much suited to and what they really want to do. And therefore they can align that with, their journey and who they're going to talk to and what they got to do. And therefore, at the end of the day, they'll be much more content and it'll be much more, satisfying to do that, rather than coming ashore, jumping into the first, getting onto the job board, applying for the first job, getting the first job, and then thinking, this does not suit me one bit, So yeah, to answer your question, the sort of process I've come up with, any deck officer will be familiar with the acronym APEM, Appraisal, Planning, Execution and Monitoring, for a passage plan.
That's right.
And mine's very similar. The A is for appraisal, and that's really like a self-inventory of working out, where am I now? What have I got to offer? The world, the industry, whatever it may be, and sitting down and thinking, through various practical pieces, how much money do I need to earn? What sort of working environment do I want to be in? What working conditions do I want to be in? And family, taking family into account. Do I want to be at home all the time, or am I willing to travel, a few days a week? Because the bottom line is, a lot of people, and I've seen this happen so many times, a lot of people come ashore, they jump into a job and they don't realize they could actually be away from home more throughout the course of a year than they were when they were working, 4 months on, 2 months off, or 3 on, 3 off. And they're like, shit, what have I done? I'm actually away from home more. So it's really, the appraisal bit is about working all that out, actually sitting down with a pen and a piece of paper and getting it out there and figuring out, right, what will suit? Because there's obviously a reason people are coming ashore. So that is the big question. What is that reason? And there's no point going from being discontent in one area on shore, or at sea, and still being discontent in that area when they come ashore. So that's really what the appraisal piece is all about. Then the P is for planning. So that's really starting to put it into action. You've got that piece, the appraisal piece done. Then you're figuring out, right, who do I need to talk to? Let's get my CV updated. Let's get a cover letter. Let's get LinkedIn sorted out, all those kind of practical things. And figuring out, is there perhaps, like you mentioned, as part of the coming ashore, there's the placement scheme. Could I be doing a bit of a placement? Could I go and even visit a company's office to figure out, is that something I want to be doing? That's right. Let's go and talk to a marine surveyor, maybe even just spend one day with them, figure that out. And LinkedIn is brilliant for this these days, to be able to connect with those people. And then the E for execution is really putting that plan into action and starting to apply for jobs, getting those first jobs, And I say first jobs because, it's not impossible to walk into your dream job you're going to be in for 30 years. But I think a lot of people, especially higher up the ranks, chief officers, captains, chief engineers, they got to remember, they're not going to come ashore and walk into like a CEO position. It's kind of like a bit of a ladder again, if that makes sense. So the first job that we get on shore is definitely not going to be, it's not going to tick all the boxes, let's say. So it's sort of figuring out where that flexibility lies as well. So yeah, E for execution, and then the C, my acronym has changed slightly from the APEM to APEC. So I've got APEC, and the C is for commitment, like actually committing to what you've figured out in the appraisal piece. So I mentioned earlier about me feeling like I sold out, which is what the exact feelings I had of, like, I've sold out on myself, I've sold out on the plan. So the commitment piece is about committing to the plan and not kind of jumping back on ship
Possibly
and
the hardest.
realizing, yeah, you know, getting that email from, perhaps you possibly build up, you know, a really good network, and you're probably still sought after to go to sea, you know, if you've had a good career. And this is the challenge I found. I was getting regular emails saying, come on back to sea, what's wrong, you know, here's a wee golden carrot. And the commitment piece is about, you know, figuring out, you know, how does that fit in, and not doing that. If the goal is to stay and to spend more time with your family in the long term, then perhaps that jumping away back to sea is not the committed thing to do. The committed thing to do would be to see it through, albeit if you're earning a bit less for a few years, you know, to stay committed to that longer term goal, you know, in 10 years, 15 years, you know, you could be up the ranks in an office, you know, job. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Well, that is a fantastic analogy that I know many seafarers will recognise and find useful. I mean, it's so much common sense, and yet so difficult to actually implement, particularly if you're on your own, if you don't have someone working alongside you, someone in that coaching, mentoring role supporting you, which is coming back to the project, the program Coming Ashore. That's what we want to provide. And having just heard from Richard there, you know, describing that process, that is the sort of expertise that individuals can access for free on the program. So really benefit. And I know you mentioned earlier you studied as a career coach and consultant, and I do know an interesting fact about you, Richard, that you appeared a few years ago on a TEDx talk.
I did. Yes.
And we may, if technology allows, try and insert a short audio clip from that, just for the benefit of our listeners, because there was some real sage wisdom there that's applicable today. So we'll attempt to include that. So just bringing it up today, you've joined us as I mentioned. What particularly do you think you can offer Coming Ashore members? Is there a particular area of expertise other than the sort of broader coaching skills? Is there something specific that you feel you can bring that someone listening to this might that feel that you're someone they'd like to work with?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I came ashore. I didn't sort of. I have worked in yacht management, so I did a bit of that on shore. When I came ashore as well, which was, you know, I went to the south of France, so I have a good bit of knowledge in terms of that. I get contacted quite often about that. People want to hear more about, you know, what it's like to manage vessels and how that kind of works. And then, as you know, I now work for HM Coast Guard,
right,
for the MCA. So I've obviously have quite a bit of information, knowledge there, etc., that may be able to help someone. I'm not too sure. One of my key eye openers there, and it actually took me 2 attempts to get into the Coast Guard, believe it or not. I applied with a very naive view of the sea, having a seafaring background, and I didn't realize what it takes to apply for like a civil service job or a more corporate job. And I think many of us at sea are possibly like that. And I thought because I had a seafaring ticket that said MCA on it, I would be a shoe-in for a job with the MCA. I didn't realize how bureaucratic it is, and how bureaucratic a lot of companies can be on shore, and how it's very important to get your method of applying, your paperwork and your script very honed. Because what we don't realize as seafarers, a lot of the times whenever we come ashore, the people who are going to see our applications at the first hurdle, very often have no connection to the sea. You know, they're possibly the HR department.
Yep.
And they're looking for certain things, and they're looking to tick certain boxes.
So,
and there's a very key way of doing that. And
yeah,
as seafarers, we may not be aware of that.
and we certainly recognise on the programme the inquiries that we get are very much along those lines about how do I write my CV, how do I network, how do I prepare for an interview. So you've absolutely touched on those very real issues, that there's just a way to doing these things, and you know, the CV gets you through that door, but then you've actually got to perform in an interview situation. So good to know that experience is something you can bring to bear in those that you end up mentoring and coaching. So thank you for sharing that, Richard. So we're coming to the end now, and I just wanted to thank Richard for his time and sharing some of his stories and his expertise.
No problem.
And just to explain the next stage, so to our listeners around the world, you should register your interest on our website in the first instance at marine-society.org, and there's a link to Coming Ashore. That will register you, and then we will follow that up, and you'll get access to a special closed private LinkedIn group, and you can access all our podcasts and subject expert webinars and other resources. We are also on all the usual channels: YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, our content under Coming Ashore. So do check us out and subscribe to get the latest updates. And we are do contact us, as I say, Richard or myself, or our other mentors. So we are here to help and just to chat and respond as you need. So just a final word from you, Richard, to any of those who are listening, if they're just considering those steps. What little word of advice lastly from you to encourage them to join the Coming Ashore program?
Yeah, sure. So my biggest word of advice would be, even if you're not thinking of coming ashore this year, if you're knowing that you're coming ashore at some stage, now is the time to start planning. You can never plan ahead enough,
True.
I believe. And if you're still at sea, say if you have 2 contracts to go and you've got leave coming up, then your leave would be the perfect time to get really planning and to contact and to start speaking to the Marine Society, because you can use that leave in a relaxed manner. You're not fighting to get a job, I need to earn money, that sort of thing. You've got the time in your hands, and that's really what it's about, is having a bit of time and planning ahead.
So true. Well, thank you again. And so it just remains for me to wish everyone safety wherever they may be, at sea or on shore, or waiting to go back to sea, or wherever you may be. And we look forward to welcoming you onto the program at some point in the future. Thank you very much.